You know, in the answers given even by Rome to our petition about this Mass, we have said, you see, that has been always our position in dealing with Rome. One of the line of attack was to say, we don't trust you. It might appear as not very sympathetic to start like that, when you have somebody who comes to you and says, I want to offer you something good. But okay, it was a possible approach, and that's the one we have chosen. In order to force them to show themselves. Because it's absolutely true, we don't trust them. It's very clear. Does not mean that in between their intention there might be also a good one, but it's not the only one. And by saying so, it's not a total closure, it's not a turning the back, it's an invitation. It's saying, listen, you have mistreated us during so much time, and now you come with offering us something that's very kind from you. But please, it does not correspond to your behavior, so explain why. We want to know why. We are ready to accept that the Church changes its position towards us, of course. If the Church wants to be kind with tradition, that's very great. But we want it to be true, not tricky. How do we dare to speak like that? Well, the facts. Which facts? Not even ourselves. The very people which have been set up by Rome, who has promised them tradition. We call them Ecclesia Dei people. Amongst them, the Society of St. Peter. Well, the poor Society of St. Peter, they are like, I don't know the name in English, Kobe, the little experimental animals. There are the Kobe's of tradition. Something like that, yes. Why? These last months of October, again October, in France, you have a very interesting development. There is something in the move in the Church with the new Pope. It's true. He tries to do something. In fact, it's something which started a little bit before. In 2003, several cardinals in Rome get together. We have to do something for the tradition. The Church is going down. There's a terrible crisis. There's a decadence. We have to do something, and why not make use of the traditional people? During this meeting, you have two lines of operation, two tendencies which show up. One will say, okay, let's make use of the Society of St. Pius X, like the spine of this new work, and let's conglomerate around this spine all the others. Society of St. Peter, Christ the King, well, all the Ecclesia Dei, indulged masses and so on, everybody under and around the Society of St. Pius X. Well, that would be very something challenging, but anyway, that's the line. Second line say, forget about the Society of St. Pius X, they will never come. No, let's set up the Society of St. Peter, Christ the King, all these others, and let's eat little by little the Society of St. Pius X. That's 2003. And since then, they are at work in the Vatican in order to set up a certain type of jurisdiction for the people who want the old Mass, in order to set up something which will be independent from the local bishops, because these local bishops are behaving so badly against the poor people who want the old Mass. Now that's the work, 2 years of work under John Paul II, the last years of his pontificate. And now, guess what? One of those who have worked the most in that new project becomes the Pope. And pretty quickly, this project is announced to the French bishops. The idea would be to set up a certain number of apostolic administrations, that is, a bishop for a certain territory, for the people who want the old Mass, indulged Mass, this type of Masses, and especially these communities like St. Peter, Christ the King. One for France, probably one for South America, in Europe, Germany, maybe. The United States, I don't know how far the project was for the United States, but in France it was very far. So far that Rome announced the project to the French bishops. We know the thing from direct source. We know the thing from Rome, who told us, and we know the thing from bishops in France. So it's not hearsay. It's absolutely certain that there was, I say there was, a project to set up an independent entity, independent from the bishops, for fostering the tradition in the Church, into brackets. That is, we get the Society of St. Pius X. And so, what did the French bishops do when this was announced to them? Different actions at different levels. On one level, which is the meeting of the bishops every 2 times a year, twice a year, they meet together and they make declarations. So last spring, the Cardinal Ricard, who is the president of the bishops of France, made a declaration in which he said that it was not acceptable to set up an independent jurisdiction from the bishops in France for the tradition. So the bishops refused the Roman project. But it's not only what they did also something else. One of the bishops wanted to speak with one of our priests to know how far, how deep the tradition is established. He told clearly, we want to do something for the tradition. We want to do something in our own diocese in order to make the Roman project void. They have only one fear, is that something would get out of their claws, of their government. And that's why they are suddenly doing something for the tradition. Now, what are they doing? They try to recuperate these entities which are more or less in the danger of being part of this new setup from Rome in the diocese. And how do they manage to do so? thanks to a very special circumstance which happens in the Society of St. Peter. In the year 2000, Cardinal Castrillon decapitated the Society of St. Peter. He kicked out of office Father Bisig because Father Bisig refused to allow to the priest to celebrate the new Mass. That's to his credit. And he put in place someone who was much more open, liberal. Now this liberal, which was for a time the District Superior of the United States for the Society of St. Peter, for the Fraternity of St. Peter, Father de Villers. Father de Villers set up in France at all the important places people who were alike, who were ready to say the new Mass. Now we have a new superior who is more severe, more strict, who would like the priest in the Fraternity of St. Peter to say only the old Mass. And so he wants to remove from office these double-sided priests who are in responsibility, especially in France, and who are in responsibility in the most important places of the Society of St. Peter. Already 1 year before the election, Father de Villers knew that he would not be elected. There was a too big majority on the other side. And so he had at least 1 year to prepare an exit, an interesting one. On the first Sunday of October, in their greatest parish in Lyon, suddenly the priest, 3 on 5, those who were in charge, were no longer priests of the Fraternity of St. Peter, but of the diocese. Nothing changed. The only thing was that this church in which the people had come was no longer a church for the Society of St. Peter, but a church of the diocese. To the point that the 2 remaining priests who were still priests of the Society of St. Peter were forbidden to celebrate the Mass in that church from one day to the other. The faithful tried to react, tried to protest, and finally the cardinal gave them another church 10 miles away from the center of the town, outside, in the former seminary which the cardinal managed to close. The former seminary of the Society of St. Peter. They are doing the same in Paris. They are recuperating the big room where they celebrate the Mass. It's already done. It was in the hands of laymen who were in favor of the Society of St. Peter. Now it's in the hands of an association which is in the hands of the bishop. The priests there are still St. Peter, but they are working with the bishop. And they are taking control of all the parish in such a way that on one day, from one day to the other, they have the whole control. And the Society of St. Peter is out. Very clever, very clever. At the same time, the Society of St. Pius X, plus these societies who basically want the Tridentine Mass, they start to represent a strength which the bishops can no longer oversee. It's very simple. Now, every year, if you look at the ordinations, 1 priest on 5 ordained in France is ordained for the Old Mass. Already now, 1/5 of the French priests are ordained for the old Mass. Well, the bishops must respect that. They can no longer avoid it. The more all these societies, they have some vigor, they want something from the religion, they are not dying, they are alive, they are growing. Not exactly what happens in the diocese. I think the record must be in France. In France, I hear many times the parish priest is in charge of 10 parishes, 12, 15, 20, 30, 32. Recently, I have heard something. I think it could be the record. I'm not absolutely sure because I don't know all the situations. A 65-year-old priest has been appointed as a vicar to an 84-old parish priest who is in charge of 92 villages, towns. I don't know whether we dare to say parishes. 92. It's in the Diocese of Chartres. Well, when you come to such figures, you just think it's done. What can they do? That's the situation. And of course, when in the diocese you see this reality, and on the other hand, the Society of St. Pius X would come there with these young priests jumping around like deers. Well, it does not make the bishops very happy. In Bordeaux, I remember the Vicar General say to our priest, well, you in your chapel, you have 700 faithful every Sunday. We in the cathedral, we have 70. Real figures. The Cardinal, President of the Bishops' Conference in France, said it this way. 10 years ago, the French bishops thought that tradition was a dying being. It was going to die its good death. Forget it. Now, they are obliged to include the tradition in their ecclesiastical horizon. We are part of the picture, if I may say so. We are part of their picture. And of course, it's not that they are in favor of tradition, it's that in order not to lose everything, they see that they have to compose with it. And right now, we have a situation in France which is very special. Because on one hand, you have this decline of the official church. You have this coming of tradition, which is, well, mighty. And you have a rise which is threatening, really threatening, of the Islam. Very, very serious. And at the same time, the state, who stole the churches in 1905, but which means who has to take care of the maintaining of these churches, sees that the churches are empty. And they say to the bishops, please, it's the community which pays for maintaining these buildings. So if you have no use for them, we are going to take them. Till now, there is a law which grants these buildings to the Catholic Church exclusively. Now there is a great threat, and it's one of the promises of this new president of France, that he will give the churches to the Muslims. He promised it. So we are in front of very interesting times in France. But you see, the situation is very complex. Don't think that there is only one side or one element. We are in the middle of a mixture of various elements. And well, of course, we try to do the best out of it, to take the most element we can. We almost got an agreement with the French bishops to get churches for nothing. But bang, it exploded. Well, okay, it didn't work. Well, we will see what's going to happen in the future. We have right now one bishop who is himself trying to find a church for us. Well, things which 10 years ago absolutely did not exist. And you may say, well, why is he doing so? What does he win with it? Well, nothing. So why does he do it? I really don't know. I'm not in his head. He did not say why. We have now, I may say, because of this report of forces, we have the access to the major shrines in France. When we come, we say to the bishops, this day we come and we get the churches. We get them in Lourdes. We get them in Lisieux. We have them for our masses. In many places, I may say in the most places in the whole world, it's unthinkable that we will be able to celebrate the Mass in one of these Catholic churches. Well, in France, in these major places, it's already done. And we can just expect that, let's say, these things will continue, will expand, but it does not happen just like that. It means a lot of fight. I may say we don't get anything just like that. And at the same time, you have a pope who has an inclination towards conservatism, towards tradition. The problem is, it's not the only tendency he has, but amongst others, he has that one, which makes, amongst others, that he would like this reintroduction of the Tridentine Mass, which makes also that he would like to see a much more seriousness in the life of the priests. Probably also in the teaching, though there we have a certain problem. But that makes that, for what I know, and probably I don't know everything, I know of 2 recent nominated and already bishops who before they were bishops did celebrate the Tridentine Mass regularly. One of them is in France. The bishops refused 2 times his nomination, and finally the Pope said, that's it. The other one is in Germany. So you start to have now bishops, new bishops, who have in their background the Tridentine Mass, which usually also goes with a traditional attitude. Catholic faith, for example, usually. Another one is a recent nomination in Rome, where the Pope imposed to a cardinal, prefect of one of the congregation, a bishop, who is our friend. Another one has also been nominated. These are recent nominations. I don't say any name because they could be burned immediately. And let's say these show that we cannot say the situation is hopeless. It's working, it's coming, little by little. But don't think that it's already the big victory. That's not true. The fight is very, very strong. The word I get from Rome about this Motu Proprio is that the Pope is under, that's the word, terrible pressures. I don't know what kind of, I don't know the nature of these pressures, but they are terrible. Bishops, cardinals make terrible pressure on the Pope to prevent this Motu Proprio. Motu Proprio, which has been announced so many times. I don't know how many times I've been told it is signed and it will be published on that day. And from people from really close to the Pope. And nothing happened. Well, of course, things happened, but not what we expect. And the last thing I have heard now is something which may indicate that it's getting closer. A letter from Casper, who hates the Tridentine Mass, and who said, well, we can no longer oppose. It's really the Pope who wants it. Another one which says they have decided to send experts in the field in order to prepare the coming of the Motu Proprio, which should arrive before the end of the year. Sorry. That's the last I've heard. So, between now and the end of the year, what could you, let's say, I have nothing very serious. That's, let's say, the best I can tell you. That's why I say, don't take it too, don't put yourself under pressure about it. I say, be if I may say. It comes, it will not come. Well, do your life, continue to live. And it comes not, I don't know. We will see. Of course it is of importance, let's say. The very fact that you see such a fight about it means, well, the enemies of the church, they are not in mistake when they fight. They hit the point. If they fight so much, this simple statement that the Mass has never been suppressed, that this Mass is still a Catholic Mass, that's the only thing they are going to say. And it's true. Well, after 40 years, while they have told you that this Mass is prohibited, that it is a sin to go and to say this Mass, suddenly they discover that it has never been prohibited. It's interesting, no? And that's what they are going to say. That this Mass has never been abrogated. And so it's still a Catholic Mass, which means that everybody can say it. And for that, just for that, you have such a fight. Well, realize that really the enemies of the church, they know that it is something important. And if it is something important for the church, we fight for it. I know there are certain people who are fearful of that, saying, well, but what is going to happen? You will have priests, Novus Ordo priests who will say this Mass, it will be confusion, and there are people who will come to us, and, well, don't fear. Try to find these priests and these faithful. Where are you going to find them? There are so few. I think that this whole story will start very slowly. And there will be a real start only if we work with this instrument. If we put pressure, yes, something could happen, but it will take time. But something is certain. This simple freedom, provided it is given, makes that after, let's say, 2 generations, the new Mass is gone. Because there will be a winner. Because the one cannot leave the place to the other. They are incompatible. And if you leave the choice to the faithful and to the priest, at the end there will be only one, and it will be the Tridentine Mass. It's very clear, very clear. And in Rome they know that. And I may say the bishops also know that. I have it in writing. When I asked for the Mass, the first time, by oral, the answer was, well, you know, fundamentally, the Pope does agree that the Mass has never been abrogated. And that hence, every priest can say it. And the top guys in Rome, well, they didn't use that word, but the cardinals in Rome, they agree. The Cardinal Sodano, Secretary of State, Cardinal Ratzinger, the Faith, Cardinal Medina, Liturgy, Cardinal Castrillon, Clergy, Cardinal Herans, that's the legislative text, they all agree. They all agree that this Mass has never been abrogated, and that hence every priest can say it. So you may say, so where is the problem? Well, you know, the secretaries of the dicasteries and the under-secretaries, they don't want. So we cannot give it to you. So that was orally. In writing, I have some faithful and bishops think that if this freedom is given to the old Mass, it will be in disfavor of the new Mass and the Pius and Paul VI and his reform. So to say, the new Mass will be undergraded, will not make the weight, will not be able to face the old Mass. And it's true. It's very clear. It's true. It's a fact. And those who hate the past of the Church hate this Mass, and they know that just if you give it, it's done with these modern things. Well, once again, in the long range, I don't say 2 years, well, I said 2 generations. Some in Rome are more positive, they say 1 generation. That's the way Rome counts. Now, if we speak of little stories, yes, it is true, the Pope wants to also, at the same time, probably later on, make corrections to the new Mass. He wants to make it more Catholic. But there really I don't know what it means. I've heard that they plan to leave the first part as is. That is, all these lectures, the new calendar and so on. For the offertory, the idea would be to give ad libitum the possibility of saying the old offertory. The canon, they would suppress canon 2 and 4. Now, that was a good year ago. And they are to work in secret. They're bound by secret, those who don't work on that. That's why I don't know exactly what is really happening, but there is something on the go in all secrecy. I can also conclude something from, that's something real, that's no longer secret, which also gives a little bit of hope, is the question of the for all and for many. You may have heard that on the 17th of November last year, a letter has been sent by Rome, by the congregation of the liturgy, to all the presidents of the bishops' conferences in the whole world, saying it's finished with the for all. In the consecration, you have to say for many. It's interesting. What is more interesting is that about only 1/10, even less, of the bishops were in favor of for many. That is, a very, very large majority was in favor of for all. Even in Rome, you have a whole dicasteries, like the one of the faith, who was unanimously in favor of for all. Which means that if suddenly from Rome you have a letter which says from now on you have to correct that, it means that the one who has decided that is really the Pope, and against all. For many, against all, almost. I may say another problem, but which is also indicative of the situation of the Church. In this very document, it is said that the bishops must prepare the faithful to this change from the for all to the for many, and they have 1.5 to 2 years to prepare for that change. Gee. Because at that time, the new Mass will be published. There will be a new publication from Rome. So I just guess that that announces other corrections which are not yet announced. It's a guess. Don't make me say what I have not said. So, at the same time, I told you we have some problems with the present Pope, and these problems are doctrinal. He's the Pope of the Council. On one hand, he refuses the abuses, let's say the two big abuses. He refuses them, does not want. So he does not want things to go too far. And he condemns that. But on the other hand, he tries to save the council. And what does he try to save in the council? He claims the council in the light of tradition. More precisely, in the light of living tradition. This word living is very, very important. When we say the council at the light of tradition, we even indicate that that could be a correct way to present the way we would accept the council, that is in the light of tradition. We have a big problem because Rome, when they say tradition, they don't say the same as we do. And remember that when Archbishop Fellay was condemned because of the consecration of bishops, in the very text they say that the root of this behavior of Archbishop Fellay was a wrong understanding of tradition, was an incomplete notion of tradition. That means that Rome has a more complete, that means another one. So when we use the word in the name of tradition, in fact, we don't speak of the same thing. When we say in the light of tradition, We say the tradition, that is the past of the church, what the church has always taught everywhere, all the time. This you cannot avoid, go around. That's the imposing, that's the norm. And so you take this council and you look, does it fit this norm or not? What is in harmony with it, we accept. That is what the church has always said, of course, we accept, no problem. What is dubious, what is curious, what is strange, we will say, if there is a Catholic way to understand it, this tradition, okay, but only that way. And if there is something which is clearly opposed, forget it. Just garbage, finish. Rome, the Pope, when he says the Council of the Light of Tradition, does not say this at all. When Archbishop Fellay explained this way of understanding, he got a letter from Cardinal Ratzinger, who told him, we don't accept that. And we're still there. That's why I say to Rome, no, we're not going to sign that we accept the Council of the Light of Tradition. Because it's an ambiguous term. It can be understood the right way, but Rome understands it's another way. So we're gone for another round there. We don't want that. Must be clear for all. So what does the Pope understand when he says at the light of living tradition? I say everything is in the word living, not in tradition, living. You have to know that this question of tradition, living tradition, is for the Pope one of his life questions. All his life he has been focusing this idea of a tradition which is evolving. And instead of evolving, they say living. You see, when you say tradition, every word with "tion," T-I-O-N, means an action. And you can look at tradition also in a way of action. That is, if we can speak of tradition, that means something is transmitted. If something is transmitted, there is a transmitter, there is a transmission. And in fact, it's true, yes, well, that's the job of the bishops of the church to transmit. St. Paul says, I have transmitted what I have received. Archbishop Fellay says, I have transmitted what I have received. So there is a transmission, there's an act of transmitting. And this is the living part of tradition. You give, again, the same which you have received, further. But now, if you have such a concept, where you only look at the way of transmitting, and you forget what is transmitted, or if you put the weight, the overweight, on the action of transmitting, and no longer look at what is transmitted, then you have a big problem, and I may say that's the present Pope's problem. Living tradition for the present Pope means the Pope himself. What is living tradition? Well, Benedict XVI, who tells us today something about the past of the Church. That's it. His way of looking at this past, his way of giving us something from this past of the Church, that's the living tradition. And if this which is delivered to us does not correspond to the past, we have a big problem. And that's exactly the problem we have with the present Pope. Because after having said that the only way to interpret the Vatican II is in the light of this living tradition, he tells us what we have to accept. And what do we have to accept? We have to accept a new definition of the relation between the faith and modern science. What does this mean? Well, maybe we should dig in it. It means a new definition of the relation between the church and the state. The Council calls that religious liberty. We are fighting that since the start. It means a new relation between the church and the other religions. We call it ecumenism, interreligious meetings. We are fighting that since the start. It means a new new definition of the relation between the Catholic Church and Judaism. And there we get crazy. We are just wondering, what are they doing there? Why do they care so much about the Jews? Well, the Jews are people like others. They refuse our Lord, okay? The Muslims also refuse our Lord. That's it. Why suddenly start to say that they can save themselves just by following their path? Doesn't make sense. Or why suddenly make a complex to the Catholics? Because, yes, it is a tragedy. Hitler has persecuted these Jews during the Second World War. Why put the burden on the Catholic Church? It's wrong, it's false. Hitler has persecuted as well the Catholic Church. You have thousands of priests who have died in the concentration camps. Why don't we speak about that? The father of Archbishop Fellay has died in a concentration camp. My grandfather, who was Swiss, he was on the blacklist of Hitler. And so we absolutely disagree with what Hitler does and did, and we don't need to be, so to say, Jew for that. It's falsifying history to focus on this, let's say, on the story of the Jews. Yes, it was something horrible to make this massacre of the Jews, but that's not the whole history of Hitler. He was really a bad guy, not only because of the Jews. And so why is the present Pope doing so much in that direction of the Jews? It's very curious, very strange. Very strange. It's like a complex. Maybe because he's German, that's possible. Maybe because he feels that there's a depth there, but he's not Hitler. And I'm sure that as a priest, as a seminarian, he was definitely against him. So, well, let's say, belongs to the mysteries we are facing. I may say we don't have all the answers. There are many, many things which we have just to take as they come and, let's say, do our job as Catholics, and that's it. How long will this crisis last? I have no idea. I'm ready to tell you, well, no longer so long. Because I know, like St. Peter, that for God 1 day is like 1,000 years. Now, I don't know whether you're happy with that answer. We could also say, because when things go really bad, it means that we are almost at the end of the bad time. Because there is a good Lord, and a good Lord who is not going to let his church be demolished totally, who made the promise that the gates of hell will not prevail, and so who will be forced, I may say, by the circumstances to say, now that's it, stop here. But how will he do that? He can, strictly speaking, he can repeat the miracle of the storm on the sea. But usually that's not the way he works. He can do it. He is mighty enough to do it. And maybe he will do it for one time. But what we have learned from history till now is that he does not work this way. He works on a much more gentle way, if I may say so, which means conversion little by little, and then with a certain acceleration, come back. A crisis in the church lasts usually 70 years. That can give you a hint. As I say, usually, it's not mathematical, of course, but it's about that. And guess what? When this crisis will be over, there will be another one. Something else, but something. Why? Because our church, our dear mother, has a name, which is Militant Church, which means that till the end of the world, we will have to fight on one way or the other. We dream of peace. We dream of triumph. We have this promise at the end, my Immaculate Heart shall triumph. What did the Blessed Mary say, Virgin Mary say when she said that? A short time of peace shall be given after the triumph. A short time of peace. And we would like this time of peace to be long. Well, we'll have a triumph. Yes, we will have a triumph. And then we go back to work. That's our life on earth. It belongs, I may say, to the divine plan of God about us, about the history of the church of salvation. There is a devil. This devil is an angel. He does not even need to sleep. He's constantly at work, and he hates God and all those who want to serve him. And God allows him to do some harm. But what is fantastic is that he cannot do more harm than what God allows him to do. And this is true for the devil, and this is true for any enemy and evil doer here on earth. We know that whatever evil happens always with the permission of God. Nothing can happen on earth without this green light of God. And when God allows something evil to happen, he fixes the limit, the amount of evil. He's really in control. We have a little pain to understand that because we see our freedom, we see the freedom of man and so on. God is in total, absolute control of whatever happens. And nevertheless, there is freedom. Well, it's really difficult to grasp that, but it's true. Both are true. Never, never, never a creature will be able to do more harm than what God allows. And you know, and you allow me to remember that to you, that it goes up to your air. Even your air cannot jump out of your head without his permission. You don't lose one hair without the permission of God. It shows you how far it goes. Speak about control. And this control of God does not hurt our freedom. That's really amazing, but that shows how great God is. And then, of course, comes the famous objection, but how can God allow such a thing if He's so good? He's perfect, He's perfectly good. So, from perfect goodness, you expect only goodness. How can the evil happen then? God is so great that if and when He allows evil, it's because out of it He will produce a greater good. This part we have a hard time to grasp. We may say, we may see it from time to time. We may see it. I think we will grasp it totally only in heaven. What we may grasp here is that the virtue will be greater if this virtue is put on trial. We will be strengthened in the trial. That's true. Our faith is stronger when we are tested. If we have absolutely no test, how can we pretend that our faith is strong? If we have never to hope against hope, how can we pretend that we have a great hope? If we have only kind people around us, how can we pretend that we really love? Where is our charity? Well, when we show it to people who do us evil, then definitely our charity is great. If it is only to the good, well, that everybody can do, it's not yet so heroic. And so we have to look to put this tremendous, immense, ununderstandable crisis in the church in that picture. If there is so much evil happening, God knows what's the great good which is going to happen there. There's something tremendous in front of us and tremendously good. This probably it will be this triumph of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I just guess, I just sort of say, sense that it will be that, but I may be wrong there, but let's suppose it's that. It will be something gorgeous, tremendous. I don't know whether we will see it from here or from there, just hope that we will see it at the right place. Pray for that. Remember this, God will never drop you if you want Him. You want God? You want to serve Him? You want to be saved? You are ready to put the price? He will never drop you. He will never abandon you. Never. You are obliged to that faith and hope. You are a Catholic, you are obliged to accept that. So to say you are obliged even maybe to this tremendous phrase which we find in the Holy Scripture, speaking of Abraham, he has hoped against hope. So you see, whatever happens, we are winners. For this, the only condition is to really want God. Give Him the first place. Search God's justice. All the rest will be given to you. It's God Himself who promised it. And God will stick to His words. I may finish by making a bet with you. You will never beat God in generosity. Try. I'm finished. The rest I'll tell tomorrow. So I will give you the blessing. Sit nomen Domini benedictum, adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini, qui fecit caelum et terram, benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maniat semper. Amen.